Okay, thank you, Ollie, for the introduction. Thank you all once again for your time today, especially over a lunchtime period, and especially to Dynamic and Education Training Foundation for allowing me to host these 4 workshops. This being workshop 3 of 4, and hasn't time flown since the first one that we did. Bit of context as to my role. So I've been in the SEND arena for 14 years now. A number of roles have included supported employment, careers guidance through the local authority, and now part of SEND strategy innovation, looking at pathways to employment with a particular focus on accessibility within apprenticeships. So just want to touch on the aims and objectives for this workshop. So the aim is to understand how to plan and execute an accessible apprenticeship pilot within the local authority. But some of the objectives are to recognise how to create a diverse pipeline of talent and develop some of those inclusive strategies as an apprenticeship employer. Identify and implement necessary processes while recognising potential challenges within the system, and learn from case studies and explore some inclusive recruitment strategies. So as we go through the workshop, feel free to ask questions and share your thoughts throughout the workshop. Lots of information to get through, but I am a little bit conscious I want to make this workshop as interactive as possible. So shall we make a start? From my experience, this is imperative that you have someone that leads in this space. Okay, and I'll give you some rationale behind it. Where this role fits is a good conversation. In terms of the work that I lead on, it sits under SEND strategy and innovation, but I also could see this work fitting around an apprenticeship hub. Some of the local authorities will definitely have an apprenticeship hub, and actually it's more that inclusive conversation around the apprenticeship hub. It could fit in also within kind of recruitment and HR. So I don't think there's any right or wrong in this space, but I think it's important that it has a place that it sits that actually allows people to collaborate. So just a couple of key points on this slide, really. A lot of my role is coordination role, working with employers, working with training providers, and also the identification of individuals that could come into this space. That's a key point. So I think it's really important that there's someone that leads in that, and there are 3 big areas when you start breaking it down. In terms of problem solving could be anything. In terms of my work, it's not just about identifying the problems, but it's also about addressing them and overcoming those problems so that the program runs more effectively. So I think it's good examples of that would be generally around things like access to work. Digital poverty is very rife at the moment in terms of some of those low-income families. So it's about how we work with others within our local authority to overcome some of those challenges. I also think strategic focus, which I'll touch on, and having someone that is I call it an SME, a subject matter expert in this space, allows you to go into conversations to actually really champion policy change within the local authority, and that's a key part of my role. So what I find is not only do I operationally run the program, but I'm now involved in a number of networks that are having that focus around inclusivity and giving them a solution to actually what this could look like. And then I suppose the tracking and outcome and kind of impact. So actually by tracking the numbers that go through the program in terms of the progression, the retention, allows me to go to my wider network and actually showcase this program works. So there's just a couple of reasons there. There's plenty, probably more, but a couple of reasons why I think it's really important to have that kind of lead in this space. Okay, next slide, Ollie. Can we play Sam's video? Hopefully it will work, Ollie. Should we give it a go?
What we do is we work with autistic adults and other people who have neurodiverse conditions, and we try to support them in achieving their best hopes. What is an inclusive apprenticeship? For this team, it's really important that we work with people who have lived experience of autism or other neurodivergent conditions, because we recognise that you have skills which maybe other people haven't noticed so much in the past or haven't appreciated. The customer service apprentice, that's really being the sort of support to our frontline workers. So we have social workers, we have an occupational therapist, and we have community support workers. And actually going out and meeting people, sort of taking on some of the tasks that they do, but also sort of engaging with the adults that we work with. The business support apprentice, that is very much geared around sort of helping me as the team manager sort of do some of the day-to-day tasks if you're involved in running the team. Every month I have to prepare sort of reports on the team performance, and actually you're going to be key in sort of helping me do that. So far we've had 3 apprentices. They've, I think, gone really well. One of the apprentices, Sam, who's actually sort of gone on to be one of our community support workers now, and he's sort of like, we're looking to try and help him sort of gain skills so he can further his career.
This has been an incredible experience in my life. This was my first job. I went to university, I got a master's degree, and I wanted to go into the industry that I wanted to go into, but I felt very insecure about my abilities in actually working with a team and kind of give back to my community as an autistic person. And I thought, well, if I can get some real world experience, and it'll all be worth it. Turns out I got a lot more than that. My teammates were so incredibly supportive of me throughout, focusing on my strengths, building upon the things I wasn't so good at, and always letting me know that my experiences and my skill set, my particular skill set from the circumstances of my life, are incredibly valuable. And from that, from the last 18 months, I've massively built my confidence up. It's a wonderful thing to have dreams and ambitions, but we can often get stuck, thinking, oh, I want to do that, but I feel like I really can't do that. The most rewarding thing about this job is I now feel like I can do those things that I've always wanted to do.
I think this is a really good opportunity if you want to kind of, sort of try out work in a safe environment, surrounded by sort of a team who are very supportive. A lot of the team, they also have sort of personal experience of neurodivergence and autism. And this is just a way to kind of like dip your toe into sort of what sort of being in a work situation could be. It's an opportunity to build skills and build confidence and just learn new things in a way where that we're going to give you a very kind of protected workload, and really try and play to your strengths rather than you having to try and fit around us too much.
Okay, so just to give you a bit of an overview, a couple of the real things with Sam, very charismatic individual, and an absolute credit to the team. It just goes to show what some of the skills that he brings to the team, not just from his working capacity, but actually some of his talents that you saw him there sitting with the guitar in the corner. And it just goes to show that kind of diversity, what it can bring to a team. But as capable as Sam was in terms of his qualification, he had no direction, lack of careers guidance in terms of next steps, and didn't really know how to promote some of the adjustments he needed in the workplace. So this pathway was perfect for Sam, and as you can see, he moved on to become a community support worker, working out in the community and helping some of those other individuals kind of almost undertake that kind of landscape and what support is actually out there. So it's a fantastic story, and Sam, from 2021, when I think he started his apprenticeship, he's still working within the council now and doing fantastically well. So it's a nice story. Okay. Next slide, Ollie. Okay, so when we talk about setting up a pilot, okay, there's probably others that I've missed on this, but I think generally these are the people that should be involved. Okay, so from the host team is central to any program. Okay, but they need to be supported by ultimately a number of those other stakeholders. If we touch on a couple of areas, you've got here HR, recruitment and compliance. So the recruitment element, okay, is the ensuring that that job description is inclusive and really kind of driving forward that inclusive message and the adjustments that can be put into play for those individuals that wish to apply for that accessible apprenticeship opportunity. But we've also got compliance. So compliance need to also be aware of the individual, okay, and that they may need some support and some time to help with those onboarding documents that, if anyone's worked for the council, we know can be quite intense. So there's a knock-on effect to who needs to be involved when you go through this accessible apprenticeship kind of process. A couple other areas. Education, and I was having a conversation with my wife last night regarding this, and we had a disagreement about it, but that's fine. But my point to her was that when we look at setting up accessible apprenticeship opportunities, the timing of your recruitment, I think, is key, and this is where our disagreement came from. But if we've got our talent within education, then we need to be thinking about when that talent comes out of education that then feeds into having the best possible opportunity for the local authority to recruit. So I always say, timing wise, generally is a great time around summer, maybe through January as well, when you do get some dropouts where people realise that those the pathway that they've maybe gone on through college may not actually be the right pathway for them. So I think there is different trigger points in terms of when we should encourage local authorities to potentially recruit in this inclusive space. And the last point I want to talk about is a little bit about learning and development. So learning and development is really key in terms of upskilling the host, okay, in this space, giving them an example of what needs to be put into play to support that onboarding process. So to give you an example, it could be a buddy or a mentoring program, okay, and I'm a massive advocate of having that designated person that can just help with that huge transition coming into the local authority. We also within Essex have what's called a disability employer network, okay, where it's almost a network where individuals can go to and support resources, things that they weren't aware of, can come into play just to help simplify that onboarding and maybe reduce some of those anxieties that individuals may have. A good example of what I'm trying to do with learning and development is also looking at an onboarding pack to help them to understand what it's like to work in the local authority. Maybe a video could go with that as well, just to give them a more visual understanding of what it's like to work in the local authority and what things like team meetings might look at, what things like where to go and get lunch, what to bring with you for a working day. There's a lot of work going on into that space to make people feel more comfortable as part of that kind of onboarding once you've completed compliance. Okay. Next slide, please, Ollie. Okay, so to give you an idea, this was a bit of a brain dump, if I'm being honest, about some of the recruitment steps that we've probably done since we started Accessible Apprenticeships back in 2021, I think it was. So you'll see a number of different adjustments that we've put in, but to give you an idea, by welcoming applicants with a disability to apply on any job description, we did a bit of work on this, it increases your applicants by 26%, okay? And that's been something that Essex has taken forward in terms of that space, and it's worked out really well. We're getting far more applicants coming through now from that inclusive job description. Also, the promotion on some of the adverts in terms of those adjustments coming in at a reduced maths and English level. And ultimately, that was historically for those that had an education, health and care plan, current or historic. But the new guidance that's come out from August, that I think we talked about in the previous workshops, mean that it can be really, really open now to those individuals coming through that realise that they can come in at a reduced maths and English level as long as they show that evidence. But one of the key things that I think has worked really well is the contact. So within recruitment now, we have almost a designated person that works with any of our accessible apprentices. Okay, and that key contact is absolutely crucial in terms of those questions that young people generally have. Okay, what adjustments can be put in for my interview and all those kind of processes. So instead of it being what we had historically was almost this is what you need, and we've got now a much more kind of personalized, person-centered approach to it, where you can obviously have that point of contact, which I think has worked really well. One of the things that is coming into our world is AI. Okay, and I think it's important that we start thinking generally about considerations for AI, and what that could look like in recruitment world. I think it's not quite happened yet, but it's very much on the horizon, and that could involve automating tasks such as CV screening, interview, scheduling, and even candidate search. So I think there are some negatives to AI in terms of accessibility issues, concerns over privacy, but I also think there could be some positives. So what we need to do is work out how our current recruitment processes can be supplemented by AI in a positive way. So I think it's something that I know inclusivity around AI is a very topical, but it's definitely something that I think we will be looking at as a local authority in the coming months. Okay, next slide on. Okay, so what I tried to do, and probably my favourite part of my role, to be honest, taking what I will call a division within the local authority on the journey to actually setting up an accessible apprenticeship. So I think the first bit where I put number one, apprenticeship goals, is about defining the objective and the rationale. Okay, what we don't want is hiring divisions that are going, I'm doing it because I feel like I should do it. What we should be having is a conversation around I'm doing it because it's about talent and I want to be inclusive in this space and the rationale is this. That's what should happen. When we talk about funding, one of my biggest challenges within my work is that funding is often for the apprenticeship only. We don't really start thinking about what's next. So if you look at what happens externally, I think it's something like 93% of businesses will take on the apprentice at the end of the apprenticeship, which is what we expect. But generally within a local authority, it's very much we reserve the funding for the apprenticeship, but then we start having a conversation right at the end as to progression planning. What we need to do and what I encourage everyone to do is look at that funding about actually, if we're investing all this time into the young person and their talent, we should also be looking at actually these individuals being retained within our organisation. I think the other thing is, well, a big part of the work is identification of that apprenticeship standard. And apprenticeship standards chop and change, and it's very difficult to keep on top of. I'm aware that there's a lot of work going on around a business admin level 2, which would be a fantastic standard to come back into the authority. So it's about keeping on top of what actually is available and upskilling those hiring managers as to possible apprenticeships that would fit the job description. So I think that's really, really important that those conversations take place. In terms of alternative application processes, when we first started this, we did a slightly amended application process, which was a write video or application. So what we wanted to do is give different options as to how people could apply for an accessible apprenticeship. And the video worked really well in that space where it allowed a young person to go to put together a mini video as to why they wanted to apply for this role, what strengths they could bring to the role, and ultimately just promoting a little bit about their want to work in this space. And that worked really well. So I think it's definitely something where we need to look as local authorities in terms of how people can apply for accessible apprenticeships in a multitude of ways. Okay. And then I think the last thing is really talking about diversifying interview panels. Normally, when I've worked with hiring managers, they usually have kind of 2 or 3 people in that interview panel. But what I've been promoting is actually, let's have individuals that are on accessible apprenticeships within that interview panel. Okay, really important that we're promoting actually that diversity within the interview panel. Okay, so one of the questions I want to put out to yourselves, I don't know whether you're aware that John Lewis have just changed their kind of recruitment policies a little bit to open up interview questions in advance for all people applying for any roles within the organisation. I just wanted to open this up very quickly in terms of what do people think about that? Because one of the big challenges I have is I use the Equality Act quite a lot in terms of interview questions up front, which can help some of our young people to, I suppose, be on par with some of the people that are also applying for the roles, what I call mainstream. Do you think that actually by John Lewis giving everyone interview questions in advance is a good thing or potentially a negative thing? And I'm going to put that open to everyone just to literally have a really quick thought regarding that and some of the challenges that that may pose or some of the positives it may bring. Does anybody want to kind of come in on that? Yes, Lydia.
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, I always Google the interview questions anyway, and I'm pretty much on point with that. And that's what I do, and that's what I suggest to my clients. But I feel that our clients are potentially at an unfair advantage anyway. So they're, as you just rightly said, they're meeting the same bar with the questions. And some companies will give them only 5 minutes before the interview, but we always try and push for that. And I think it's a good thing for our clients.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Lydia, for that. Who else have we got? Sorry, I can't see. Ollie, who else have we got? Is that Vicky?
David Hills, I think, is next.
David. Sorry,
Hi,
David.
Hello there, folks. How you doing? Everyone, regardless of who they are and regardless of who they're being interviewed by, should have the interview questions in advance. Even, I mean, I know that when I worked in for a public body previously as an educator, in my both being recruited into the organization and my promotion interviews, it was standard practice to be called for interview and at the appointed time be given the interview questions and told we'll call you into the meeting in 15 minutes, because otherwise all you're testing is someone's ability to think on their feet. And I think the only skills you're testing there in an interview like that is, I don't know, for an improvised stand-up comedian, it gives everyone the opportunity to think, gather the thoughts, and give considered answers to interview questions. So it's not an accessibility or an inclusion issue for me. It's good practice.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave, for that. And Vicky, we'll make it the last one if that's okay, and then we can move on.
I would just basically, I'm going to probably echo what David has said there. I think the beauty of an interview is that we're coming with an opportunity to showcase who we are, what our skills and strengths are. And some people are excellent under pressure and they thrive in that way, but I would say that is the minority. And often some of the most nervous people in an interview are nervous because they really care and they want to excel and they want to do well, and they might not have had a lot of opportunities to interview.
Yeah.
So by giving them opportunity to kind of do that, so that willingness to put the work in, like I'm working towards this and I'm demonstrating to you that I've spent the time considering these questions, and surely that way we're getting the best out of everybody's skill set and everybody's levels of experience.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you for everyone's feedback on that. Really interesting. Right, next slide, please, Ollie. Okay, we've just got about 5 minutes to go through this. I want to leave some time at the end for some of the questions generally around the presentations. So obviously I've talked a little bit about some of the kind of processes, looking at some of the kind of adjustments we've made through general recruitment processes within a local authority. But I really wanted, in terms of other local authorities, your kind of current thoughts in terms of your recruitment processes and areas where development needs to happen. So again, I'm going to put this out to the audience just to give thoughts on, you know, positives, maybe some areas of development within their kind of recruitment processes as a local authority, please. Who wants to kickstart? Is that David?
Hi, Jonathan, it's Mamonia.
Hello, Monia.
Hi, sorry, excuse my voice is going in and out. But one of the things I'd really like to see in the local authority is with one of our other companies, they release apprenticeships every single year. I would like to see a longer lead time in terms of the recruitment process that will incorporate the opportunity for the young people we're putting forward to do a work trial and have that as part of the interview process. The whole application process happens very quickly. I think for a lot of our young people, there need to be a little bit more of a longer lead time, but we are trying to work with the department so that can happen.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Work trials is something that we know doesn't happen enough, but again, is a really good way of actually looking at skills within the workplace. That kind of interview situation where you've got half an hour to you know, put you on the spot to prove that actually you can do the role doesn't quite work for our guys, but actually showing it visually or through a work trial is a fantastic way of actually showing that inclusivity. So completely in agreement. I think it's definitely something that we will keep pushing for more as a local authority.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts on those kind of recruitment processes before we move on?
Just something I've kind of observed is kind of across both local authorities and NHS and other organisations is that usually they have a relatively rigid application process, be that a system that they use to fill in or requesting a CV. And I think having flexibility of that CV, be that or equivalent, be that a profile or a short video, would enable a much more diverse range of individuals applying. I mean, especially when you think of some areas in the NHS where they use a specific system, it's not overly inclusive in terms of how you fill that system in, and actually, you know, it's relatively complicated to do so because you need to make an account and then after make an account, find the right advert and so on and so forth. So I think having a range of different ways in which you can communicate your desire to work for that organisation is really important.
I think it's been a big challenge for us in terms of those adverts, really trying to push forward that inclusivity and get it to the top of the advert to really welcome those individuals.
Yeah.
You know, the disability confident, leader status, obviously probably needs a bit more work done generally around that. But again, it's a symbol that people recognise to actually come into that space. So there's, yeah, okay, great. Thank you so much for everyone's kind of feedback on that. Okay, next slide, please, Ollie. Okay, so I wanted to gain a bit of a brain dump in terms of creating that kind of supportive workplace culture. And I think one of the key areas really is that kind of training for hiring managers, almost highlighting that there is a fantastic kind of talent pool out there. The benefits of what we should be doing as a local authority is one that reflects our local community. I'm a massive advocate of that. But also training for managers should really cover that when we talk about adjustments. I don't know what statistic it would be, but generally most of the adjustments that we put in have zero cost. Okay, it's more about an awareness and understanding of the individual, and that's where things like adjustment passports come in, or support profiles that actually give that general understanding of some of those adjustments that really are going to, you know, simplify that landscape for kind of hiring managers. Also, a little bit about accessibility and implementation of that adjustment passport or empowerment passports. So if I give you the difference between the adjustment passport and the empowerment passport, the adjustment is almost that kind of onboarding document that allows you to say, this is what I'm going to need, whether it's access to work support, whether it's adaptive technology, or more of an understanding about maybe a couple of the flexibilities that I might need in my work under my working pattern. The empowerment passport is more that I think fits into recruitment, whereas it's almost like what I call, best way to describe it is a zip folder that has got all the documentation in that you may need to showcase that you might need some of those adjustments. So it could be, for instance, your education, health and care plan. It could be your qualifications around maths and English to have those adjustments. It could be your adjustment passport could go in your empowerment. It could be any details around access to work or your reference numbers and things like that. So it's a zip folder you can take with you into the workplace that allows, whether it's a training provider and employer, to have all the documentation that they need. So the other thing as well, what I want to talk about is generally around structure of support and onboarding. Okay, and I'm a massive advocate that people talk about job coaches, people talk about mentors, people talk about buddying systems, but actually we struggle sometimes in terms of having those resources within a local authority. And that's because generally there's a massive shortage of job coaches up and down the country when we have this conversation around inclusive employment. So actually there's two options really. We either identify people within our own organisation that could either be mentors, and there's a learning mentor, I think it's a level 3 qualification that people could do. There's TSI training that people could do, which is training in systematic instruction, very good around kind of autistic individuals. And then you've got a level 3 supported employment qualification that is ultimately like a job coach qualification that's run by BASE. So if we don't identify people within our organisation, we have to grow our own, because that's your mechanism of some of that support and structure that's going to create that kind of work or that inclusive workplace culture. And I think the other thing is that we need to be better at using ambassadors. So anyone that's come onto an apprenticeship program, let's use them as ambassadors. Let's go out to education to promote accessible apprenticeships through those ambassadors, or let's bring ambassadors into wider conversations that can almost showcase what maybe we need or what we're lacking within that kind of inclusive space that actually could really help some of our kind of neurodivergent individuals that work for the council. So there's a few bits on there, but ultimately it's about that leading by example conversation. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once you've recruited an accessible apprenticeship, there's some processes we encourage to ensure a little bit about stability for all parties. So we talked about that mentor or buddy system, really crucial in those early weeks to actually have someone that can really just allow that individual to come into the local authority, be supported, and also be that kind of point of contact. They also can help them with things like you know, some of those behaviours within the organisation, and also a little bit about sharing that adjustment passport with the wider team, feeling comfortable about saying, this is me, this is the adjustments I need, this is how best to support me within my workplace. Also, we talked a little bit about that kind of disability training for the team. Okay, absolutely crucial. But what should happen for hiring managers? Hiring managers should then reach out to say, I need training within this specific disability, okay, or a physical disability, whether it's autism or whether it's a sensory disability. So there's a number of things there. Obviously reviewing, checking in regularly with that training provider, making sure we're on track with the apprenticeship is absolutely crucial, and building up that working relationship with your training provider is absolutely crucial as to what works for the training provider that the employer could take on board that actually could support that apprentice further in the workplace. Okay, next slide please, Ollie. Okay, so a little bit about celebrating success. Okay, you'd have seen a bit earlier the video of Sam. This is a video with the first two accessible apprenticeships that we did within the council. I'll never forget them because I always got their names muddled up. Connell and Connor, bit of a tongue tweezer taste of that one. But generally, they both did customer service level 2. Okay, very general standard. Okay, and we did that as part of our pilot just to understand how this apprenticeship pilot would work. They both worked within adult social care. so they had good structure of support around them through that division. They've completed their amended apprenticeship. They did 20 hours a week, okay, both of them. So it wasn't adjusted in terms of the duration. It went on a little bit longer, but 20 hours work for them, okay. They've completed their EPA. They both got distinctions, which is absolutely fantastic for our first two that came through. You've got Connell, who is on your left, that went on to do his personal trainer level 3. And some people ask, why did he go on to personal training when he was doing customer service? But the customer service qualification gave him the transferable skills. And because he didn't quite know what he wanted to do in his career, it's given him the platform in terms of some of those softer skills that we take for granted. And after he completed his apprenticeship, the words that will always stay with me is he said, I know what I want to do. I want to go into personal training. That's what I want to do for my career. And he's now doing that as a level 3. And he's a huge ambassador throughout Essex in terms of talking about accessible apprenticeships, which is fantastic. In terms of Connor on the right, okay, he's working for Tesco's now. He's a full-time member of staff. He does 37 hours a week, and he uses that customer service qualification in his role. And he's again, they're both getting on fantastically well. But what I don't think we do is enough of this in terms of celebrating success. Whether it's working with a training provider that's really come into this inclusive journey, we should celebrate that inclusive success. Whether it's an employer or whether it's the young people that in this case have literally completed their qualification, which is fantastic. We need to do more in that space in terms of celebrating all parties and driving forward that message around inclusivity. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so just want to touch on this really around access to work. So, and its significance to supporting some of our accessible apprenticeships through my experience. So, as you know, access to work can support with things like assistive technology, workplace adaptations, potentially job coaches or fun job coaches, and a lot around travel. Okay, access to work is under huge pressure at the moment, generally speaking. And we know, going back to the point I made right at the start around our workforce, 30% of it is going to be kind of neurodivergent by 2030. Access to work is going to be heavily relied on. So I suppose I wanted to put my last question out to the wider audience as to, do we use access to work as a local authority? I'm sure we do. Okay. But do we have a central pot? So if we're talking about bringing accessible apprentices into the local authority, in my experience of working with some very low-income families, where, as some of you will be aware, those families have to pay out for access to work before they get the money reimbursed. That is a potential barrier, and that can stop some of our individuals going on to an apprenticeship pathway. So I suppose the question really is, what is your understanding around access to work within your local authority? And is it a challenge, or do you have kind of a central pot that can support those low-income families to actually to help them financially so that it doesn't impact on the young person taking on that opportunity? So just thoughts on that. Ollie, feel free to come in as well. Lydia, straight in.
Yeah, because our council is brilliant. So you just literally go on your centralised system and you can order whatever you want, and it comes from the access to work pot. Totally there and on board with it. Great.
So that's brilliant for internal staff. Okay. Is there a pot that can help?
Yeah, there is. So even for work experience, they will supply and provide anything that's needed.
Okay, that's fantastic. It's just something that I've come across quite a lot, and I've used what we spoke about on the previous workshop, the DWP grant, to help some families out, because I was struggling to be able to support some of those families who would, and I use Connell as a great example. He's doing his personal trainer qualification, level 3. but the actual opportunity for the employer was quite rural where it was. It's a very inclusive gym. And I think it worked out to be about £30 a journey to get him to and from work. That was £60 a day, and he's doing 3 days a week. That's a lot for a family to pay out, knowing that generally through access to work, it's quite challenging getting that getting that payment back. And usually it can take 2 or 3 weeks for that payment to come back, best case scenario. So it's just something that I wanted to make people aware of, that actually access to work can really, it's a great tool, but actually do we have a pot that can support some of those families that are struggling in that space?
I would just add to that, one of the issues we definitely see is the lack of knowledge around access to work with employers. I mean, at a local authority level, they 100% understand what it is, but then I mean, the smaller the employer gets, the lack of knowledge of exactly what it is, how it can support, and if you're looking at access to work initially just simply on their existing staff, that removes the barriers in terms of thinking that it's going to be an issue in terms of, or the process is going to be an issue in terms of individuals that are coming in as new entrants.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's not promoted very well. I think it's fair to say.
And we're doing some work with businesses going forward. And we're going to have a website generated in terms of what those structures of support look like, and more of an overview of access to work and some of the processes behind it. So I think it's a really valid point, Ollie, that actually more work needs to be done in that space, because as much as it's a really good tool, more awareness needs to be created, especially through our SMEs or small medium enterprises.
And very much, it's you don't know what you don't know.
Yes,
for employers.
Absolutely. Okay, next slide, Ollie. I think we're on the last slide. Okay, so just a bit of a recap, really. Ultimately, we talked right at the start around that specific resource, and I can't promote it enough, that my work goes into so many spaces that is about working with training providers, working with employers, and working with individuals. But there's a wider piece here about actually allowing some of those wider conversations within the local authority to actually bring networks in, create those opportunities to support, individuals coming through. We haven't got a problem with identification. We're working with 31 SEND schools in Essex. The amount of young people that want to come into this pathway isn't an issue. But if we don't have the employers coming through that understand, that want to come into this inclusive space and also understand their role to play in this, then it's quite challenging. So I think also drive awareness of pathways to employment throughout education. I think as much as this workshop is very much around accessible apprenticeships, I think there's also conversation around, well, we've got work experiences, we've got volunteering, then we've got support internships, we've got accessible apprenticeships, we're doing some work around entrepreneurship, but it's about driving that awareness through the pathways and trying to get young people ready to be able to take on this opportunity, have that resilience, have those skills, more employability work that's done in education to get people in terms of their readiness. I think simplify the offer. We're doing a huge piece of work on this at the moment. And what we did previously is we worked with training providers depending on where the employers wanted to go or what opportunity there was. What we're trying to do now is our offer going forward is very much going to be, we're going to work with 16 to 25 that are going to be Essex residents. We're going to work with those with a current or historic education, health and care plan. We're going to work with 3 training providers, simplifying our offer to make it easier to work with those employers and drive that message through those training providers, and work across probably about 11 different industries, which offer about 50 standards. So we're really trying to drive, make it a bit more simplistic for businesses in terms of what we offer, make it a bit more simplistic for education so they can see exactly what this offer looks like, and then have the website that actually really promotes, from a business point of view, funding, support mechanisms, training, etc. So businesses feel comfortable to come into that space. So that's what we've learned from that kind of initial pilot to now, where we're really trying to simplify what that offer looks like for businesses and training providers alike. And then I suppose really the whole purpose of my work is not tokenistic. I say this to councillors, I say this to all the different networks that I come in contact with as a local authority. This is about talent. I know there's talent there because we've done 50 of these accessible apprenticeships now, which is fantastic. The standard or the talent that is out there is unmatched. What we have to do is allow them to have that pipeline or that pathway to come into this space. Hence, obviously, why you need someone who's that kind of specific resource.